Trump carried out his threats. The United States launched powerful strikes in Iran. For the first time in 6 days, the United States military resumed its strikes in Iran, and United States President Donald Trump has entered an escalation mindset. A devastating American blow in Iran. Dozens of Revolutionary Guards targets were destroyed overnight, and the United States military is striking with force in response to Iran's attempts to harm American forces in the wider Middle East. And this morning, the American plan to expand the war in Iran was revealed. Aerial bombardment that could continue for up to 2 weeks. And we will soon show you what the American attack on Iran could look like. Iran and the United States are opening another front in their confrontation. The conflict in the Middle East is expanding. Washington has imposed new sanctions on Iran, resumed its airstrikes, and is threatening a heavy attack. Iran is making it clear that it intends to establish a new order not only in the Gulf but also in its relations with Europe. And today, we'll also show you how Israel has entered a focused arms race against Hezbollah, a race that continues even during the ceasefire. A senior official in the pro-Iranian militias in Iraq announced that they are preparing to respond against the United States within 72 hours. And for the first time in nearly 3 weeks, a Qatari-controlled gas tanker has sailed out of the Strait of Hormuz. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani, and we're boots on the ground. We are bringing you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and also the full truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. Today is July 30, so let's begin. The United States military launched a new wave of strikes after President Trump threatened to beat the hell out of the Iranians following the launches towards the American base in Jordan. And according to reports, the commander of the United States Central Command has formulated a plan for an extensive air campaign that would include intensive strikes in Iran for approximately 2 weeks, with the goal of severely damaging the Islamic Republic's missile array. The United States Central Command, CENTCOM, announced that it had launched a wave of strikes in Iran. The strikes are a powerful response to Iran's attempts yesterday to attack American forces that are stationed in the Middle East. And the Revolutionary Guard's Fars news agency reported that missiles attacked in several areas near the city of Abadan and an airstrike in the area of Qasem Island. Explosions are also reported in Bushehr, and last night, drones struck American gas tankers at the port of Damietta in Egypt on the Mediterranean coast. And according to the security company Ambria, 3 sources confirmed the Reuters news agency that a tanker had actually been attacked by a drone and that a fire broke out at the site and spread to another tanker. So according to Ambria, the tankers are American-owned and were sailing under the flag of the Marshall Islands. So far, no casualties and no damage was reported to the port, and nothing has been reported. But after the attack, Trump said that it is a little more than of the same. It is going to straighten out. Regarding Iran, he said, "We need to hit them little. We need to hit them a little more." And last night, CENTCOM announced that it had attacked militias operating by Iran in Iraq, together with the Saudi military, after intercepting several ballistic missiles that are launched by the Revolutionary Guards towards the United States military base in the Middle East. This was the first time that Iran had attacked an American base since Washington suspended its strikes on Friday. Yesterday afternoon, President Donald Trump threatened Iran with a harsh response, saying, "We will beat the hell out of them." And according to officials familiar with the discussions, Trump is still considering the options for a military response against Iran and has not yet decided where to strike or how powerful the attack will be. According to them, Trump was not surprised by the Iranians and their decisions to resume the fighting, and he's now in an escalation mindset. Trump is considering approving a plan for an extensive air campaign against Iran that would include between 10 and 14 days of intensive strikes aimed at severely damaging its missile array. This is according to officials that are familiar with the internal discussions in the American administration. The plan has formulated by the commander of CENTCOM, Admiral Brad Cooper. Cooper presented the plan last week during an unusual discussion that was held aboard Air Force One after Trump attended the dignified transfer ceremony for the 4 American soldiers that were killed in the war. The goal of the plan is to move from a policy of exchanging limited strikes to a continuous offensive campaign that would significantly damage Iran's ability to launch missiles at the American forces and at their allies. Cooper believes that the strikes carried out so far have failed to deter Tehran, which was continued to threaten the shippings in the Strait of Hormuz and also launch missiles towards American forces in the region. Therefore, in his report, the way to break the deadlock is to sharply expand the scale of the strikes and inflict deeper damage on Iran's missile infrastructure. So according to officials that are familiar with the details, one of the central assumptions behind the plan is that a broader attack could eventually reduce the burden on the United States air defensive systems. In other words, if more launchers are destroyed, fewer missiles need to be intercepted. And according to the report, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth supports the plan, while Trump is also considering the possibility of a more limited attack that would leave the door open for continued diplomatic contacts. So President Trump's harsh remarks caused significant fluctuations in international markets. The global price of oil surged by nearly 8% within a short time after the interview and now stands at $90.4 per barrel, compared with approximately $83 only around 12 hours earlier. The international intelligence community has determined with certainty that Mustafa Khamenei, the son of the supreme leader and his designated successor, is still alive. In addition, alarming figures were presented showing that Iran currently possesses an arsenal of approximately 1,500 ballistic missiles available for use. Regarding the report that China would supply Iran with 400 launchers that would pass through Pakistan after Chinese President Xi Jinping told Trump that he would not send weapons to Tehran, the president responded, "That would be surprising." Things like that happened. He said he would not take part in it, and he knows that I would be disappointed. End quote by Trump. Preparations for escalation are also underway here in Israel and within the IDF, which are focused on Iran and Lebanon. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met last night with American Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, one day after his meeting with President Trump. He told me something interesting, Netanyahu said. In the energy and in the economic arena, the United States Treasury Department imposed broad sanctions on companies that are cooperating and operating a shadow fleet and forced maritime insurance mechanisms that are financed by the Revolutionary Guards. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated in an official announcement, with their economy collapsing and inflation in the double digits, the regime is desperate for cash. The United States will not allow Iran to take global commerce as hostage or use international shippings to finance the Revolutionary Guard's terrorism, aggression, and repression. And at the same time, the United States is expanding production of Patriot missiles against the backdrop of the escalation with Iran and amidst concerns over the developing of weapons stockpiles following the fighting in Iran and Ukraine. The United States Department has decided to significantly accelerate the production rate of air defensive missiles. Tehran's struggle over the Strait of Hormuz requires it to thwart any plan to develop alternative routes that would bypass it and to carefully maintain its position in Iraq and in Lebanon. Against this backdrop, the activation of the military in Iraq is not merely a return to their original purpose as a ring of fire, because around Israel and the United States, it's also Iran's way of sending a message to the Gulf. If you try to bypass us, we will set all the routes on fire. By the way, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah met in Washington with leaders of the evangelical community and senior AIPAC officials. This was announced by Prime Minister's office. Netanyahu thanked the evangelicals for their support for Israel and called on them to stand against anti-Semitism. Do not be intimidated when you face an attack. You fight back. Now is the time to fight. And Prime Minister Netanyahu later met at the Blair House with Senators Tom Cotton, John Fetterman, Tim Shea, and Ted Cruz, and thanked them for their support for the alliance between Israel and the United States. Fetterman said that he was proud to be the conscience of the Democratic Party in Congress and to stand with Israel. The Israeli defense establishment is warning of rapid deterioration in the security situation in the region. A senior security official said that as things appear right now, the path towards escalation with Iran is very close. These warnings come as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu holds key meetings in Washington intended to strengthen strategic and security coordination between Jerusalem and Washington. So, while the Hezbollah terrorist organization is training new drone operators and equipping itself with drones using longer fiber optic cables, the Israeli Defense Ministry has carried out a rapid procurement for anti-drone defenses. This includes purchases from dozens of companies, non-stop testing, and an effort to build an effective defensive array from all the available systems. Some in the defense establishment estimate that when the fighting resumes, the result will be a success rate of more than 90% in intercepting the drones. All the details coming real soon. So, as you can see, we have a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Ashlea Alex, and we're boots on the ground. We're bringing you the full truth about what's happening here in Israel and about this war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. And we need your help by hitting the subscribe button. So just before we begin, share this video with somebody who cares about Israel and wants to know what's happening here. Let people know. Leave me a comment. Tell me why it's important to fight terrorism and not let them grow in your borders. Okay, you can also look us up, Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani, on our social media accounts. And I want to tell you about something that I've been following for quite a while now. Something that I believe matters now more than ever. There are people around the world who want the Israeli family businesses to disappear completely, but not through rockets or through terrorism, but through economic pressure, through boycotts and isolation. Their goal is simple: to make it impossible for these families to survive. But there's a powerful way to push back, and it's called Lev Haolam. In Hebrew, it means the heart of the world. So every month, you receive a surprise box filled with authentic products made by Israeli families: olive oil from the Judean hills, honey from the Negev, wine from the Golan Heights, handmade ceramics, spices, skincare, products, and so much more, all shipped directly from the Holy Land to your doorstep. And here's what I love about this. This isn't charity. These families aren't asking for handouts. They're asking for customers. So every box that you receive supports real Israeli families, strengthens the local businesses, and also sends a clear message that the boycott will not win. So if you love Israel and you're looking for a practical way to stand with the people of this land, this is one of the most meaningful things that you can do. So right now, you can receive 40% off of your subscription. Again, 40% off, plus a special bonus gift box exclusively for the TBN Israel viewers. So just visit Lev Haolam, LEVHAOLAM.com, okay, levhaolam.com, and use the promo code TBN at checkout. Or simply scan the QR code that you see on the screen now, and the discount will be applied automatically. I got one box and it's amazing, so try it for yourself. And thank you for standing with Israel and for supporting the families who call this land their home. We need your help. The important question this morning is not whether the United States struck Iran. It is what Washington is trying to change before Iran can launch again. American forces began the new wave at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Iranian authorities then reported explosions near Qasem Island, around Abdan, and in Bushehr province, and in the Water Khuzestan area. These locations are not random points on the map. Qasem sits beside the Strait of Hormuz and supports surveillance, air defenses, naval activity, and the movement of missiles and drones. Abdan and the surrounding southwest connects Iran's military infrastructure to ports, refineries, roads, and launch corridors. The first operational goal is therefore to blind and slow the Iranian response. Radar sites detect aircrafts and ships. Command centers connect those sensors to missile batteries. Storage areas feed the launchers. Roads and communications keep the system moving. When several links are struck during the same window, Iran may still possess missiles, but it becomes harder to find the targets, issue orders, and then move launchers, and also fire again before the next American attack. So this move followed Iran's attempts to hit American forces at Mawfaq Salti Air Base in Jordan. 5 ballistic missiles were launched from Iran. Jordan and the United States say that all 5 were intercepted, and President Trump described it as a surprise attack and said that the defenders had only minutes to react. Iran says that the base was selected after American A-10 and F-15 aircrafts were redeployed there. And that explanation is important because it shows that Tehran was not firing symbolically into empty spaces. It says that it was tracking the aircraft movements and selecting a military target connected to the American campaign. The missiles failed to reach the base, but the attack still crossed a major threshold. It was a direct Iranian launch against American forces during a fragile pause, not an operation carried out only through a proxy group. The response began in Iraq before the latest strikes inside Iran. American and also Saudi aircrafts attacked militia logistics sites, weapons storage facilities, and positions used to launch missiles and drones. Iraqi militia sources reportedly terminated 20 people. The United States terminated 20 Iraqi militias that are supported by Iran, including Iranian advisors and technical personnel, with additional casualties that are still being assessed. The Saudi role may be more consequential than the casualty count. Riyadh has spent months trying to defend its oil infrastructure without formally entering a broad war, but this time Saudi Arabia publicly joined an American operation against the forces that are tied to the Revolutionary Guards. The message was direct. Attacks on Saudi energy facilities and American bases will be treated as one connected campaign. That creates a serious problem for Tehran. Its network was designed to give Iran distance and deniability. Militias in Iraq could pressure Washington. The Houthis could threaten the shipping and the Saudi infrastructure. Hezbollah could tie down Israel, but when those actions produce coordinated American, Saudi, and Israeli responses, the network begins to unite Iran's opponents instead of dividing them. Everybody is fighting together against the regime in Iran. And before we continue, I want to call on you to help us share the truth from Israel. Like this report, share it, and subscribe to TBN Israel so you never miss another update of Boots on the Ground. Know that what you see on YouTube is only part of the story, and you can get a closer, first-hand report, behind-the-scene moments, and also stories of faith, resilience, and hope from Israel by going to www.tbn.org/journeys/boots. Again, that's tbn.org/journeys/boots. And you can also text the word boots to 316-316 to receive direct updates from TBN Israel. When our teams report from Israel, you're not only watching events from a distance, you are seeing what's happening through the eyes of us who live here on the ground. And now, to understand the decision that is being made in Washington, I want to hand over this report to Ashlea Alex, the one and only.
Thank you, Yair. The military action is already underway, but President Trump is still deciding whether this becomes a limited punishment or the opening of a sustained air campaign. The most aggressive option under discussion was prepared by Admiral Brad Cooper, the commander of United States Central Command. The plan calls for 10 to 14 days of intensive strikes aimed primarily at Iran's ballistic missile system. That would mean moving beyond isolated retaliation and attacking the complete chain: launchers, storage bunkers, production facilities, command centers, radar coverage, and the roads used to hide and reposition mobile systems. Cooper presented the concept during an unusual meeting aboard Air Force One. The discussion included Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It took place after President Trump attended the return of 4 American service members killed in the war. The setting helps explain the pressure inside the administration. This is no longer a theoretical debate about deterrence. American personnel have been killed, bases have been targeted, and Iran continues to test how much risk Washington will accept. Cooper's argument is based on military arithmetic. Every Iranian missile destroyed on the ground is one less missile that Patriot, THAAD, Aegis, or fighter aircrafts must intercept in the air. A stronger offensive could therefore protect American forces while reducing the rate at which expensive defensive missiles are consumed. General Kane's warning is broader. A campaign may destroy launchers, but it can also produce second and third order effects. Iranian attacks on additional bases, pressure on Gulf governments, wider disruption of shipping, militia attacks in Iraq and Syria, or demands for American interceptors in several theaters at the same time. The United States is already expanding interceptor production. A 7-year framework is intended to raise annual PAC-3 MSE capacity from roughly 600 missiles to about 2,000. But factories cannot solve tonight's problem. Commanders must fight with the inventory already positioned in the region. President Trump is therefore weighing 2 paths. One is a concentrated campaign designed to damage Iran's missile force deeply enough to change the balance. The other is a narrower strike package that punishes the latest attack while preserving a diplomatic exit. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the leaders discussed 3 possibilities: a broader agreement with Tehran, continued pressure around the Strait of Hormuz, or renewed military action. Netanyahu also made clear that the final decision belongs to President Trump. Saudi Arabia is involved in that political calculation. Defense Minister Khalid bin Salman met Vice President J.D. Vance and also met President Trump in Washington. He carried a personal message from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman about the war and the danger to Saudi infrastructure. Riyadh is also discussing an international coalition to protect shipping in the Red Sea from Houthi attacks. The administration is using financial pressure alongside military force. New sanctions have targeted IRGC-linked maritime extortion, shipping networks, and entities accused of forcing commercial vessels to purchase protection or follow Iranian-controlled routes through Hormuz. The objective is to deny Tehran the ability to turn military intimidation into a recognized source of authority and revenue. So the choice facing the White House is not simply whether to strike harder, it's whether a larger attack can reduce Iran's ability to retaliate faster than it expands the number of fronts the United States must defend. Yair, back to you.
Thank you very much, Ashlea. Now, Israel is watching the American decision while preparing for 2 connected fronts closer to home. In southern Lebanon, a Hezbollah explosive drone struck an unmanned Israeli D-9 bulldozer near the Ali Tahrir Ridge. There were no casualties, but the method matters because the drone was guided by fiber optic cables, which can make it difficult to jam because the operator does not depend on a normal radio link or Wi-Fi signal. The ridge is also where the dozens of Hezbollah operatives have been trapped inside the tunnel and inside an infrastructure underneath the ground. While Israeli forces control the surrounding area, Israel is now considering a response, and the tunnels themselves are amongst the possible targets. Destroying them could eliminate a tactical threat, but it could also end the current ceasefire in practice. Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir visited troops in southern Lebanon and ordered them to remain ready for a rapid return to offensive operations. His message was that the campaign across the region is not finished and that Israel is prepared to deepen its actions if required. And during the ceasefire, Israel has used the time to improve its defenses against Hezbollah's drones arrays. The Ministry of Defense spent approximately 1.5 billion shekels over 2 months to counter drone systems from dozens of companies. Testing continues because no single technology solves the entire problem. So electronic warfare may defeat one drone. A gun interceptor, a laser, or another drone may be needed against another one. Hezbollah is also adapting. They're training new operators. They're acquiring longer fiber optic cables. The northern front reaches into Syria as well. Israeli artillery struck near the villages of Maria and Abdin in the western Dara countryside. That area sits close to the junction between southern Syria, Jordan, and the Israeli border. Any Iranian effort to move weapons, observers, or militia cells through this corridor receives immediate attention. At sea, the struggle is becoming political as well as military. Iran rejected an Omani proposal for Shaher management of the navigation between Oman and Tehran to share the management of the Strait of Hormuz, because they want control of the routes, not only the payment of the services. The United States insists that Hormuz is an international waterway and that the Revolutionary Guard have no authority to decide which commercial ships may pass. One Qatari-controlled liquefied natural gas tanker has now reportedly crossed the strait for the first time in nearly 3 weeks. That signals a transit, but it does not mean that the crisis is over. It shows that shipping companies are testing whether protected movement is possible, while Iran and the United States fight over who sets the rules. The missiles over Jordan, the strikes inside Iran, the Saudi operation in Iraq, and the drone in Lebanon are now parts of one regional contest over deterrence and control. Will Washington's new defensive force force Tehran back to an agreement or trigger the wider campaign that every military in this region has been preparing for? Let me know what you think about this. And in the meantime, keep spreading the truth. Know what's happening and help us by praying for the situation. Okay, look us up also on Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani's social media accounts, and unite in prayer. When you pray, pray for wisdom to our leaders, pray for the soldiers, the men and women who need all the help that they can get. Pray for the children for a better future, and above all, for God's will to be done. Thank you so much. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.